The state of California has spent more than $20 billion on housing for the homeless since 2020. So why do public encampments continue to grow? Progressives in the city of San Francisco are learning the hard way that government can build more shelter, but that doesn't mean the homeless will use that shelter. The city released data last week showing that 55% of homeless individuals rejected shelter when offered it. Alicia Finley has been looking into those numbers. Alicia, why won't homeless people offered housing use it?
Well, for one, because they actually come to the city because of the open access to and easy access to drugs. And Mayor London Breed, San Francisco mayor, has actually said as much, that 90% of the homeless on the streets are actually from other areas. So it has nothing to do with actually the housing costs. The problems are drug use and mental illness.
So what is special about San Francisco when it comes to drug use that would make it a mecca? And are you saying that they had the homeless who come to San Francisco had housing elsewhere?
Well, some of them did, but one of the issues is, well, one, California's Prop 47, which was a 2014 ballot initiative that effectively decriminalized drug use, which made it really difficult for cities like San Francisco and others in California to enforce drug crimes or leverage penalties to force people into treatment. Now, the second issue is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling. Actually, there have been two rulings that basically create a right to vagrancy.
Right to vagrancy.
Vagrancy, right. So they write into the Constitution a right to vagrancy by deeming it that said states or localities cannot enforce anti-camping laws, so cannot clear their streets of homeless people.
Wait a minute. This is a right to vagrancy in the U.S. Constitution?
Yes, right. That's right. The Eighth Amendment.
I haven't read that anywhere. When I read the Constitution, it's in the Eighth Amendment.
Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. So apparently, it's cruel and unusual punishment to fine or to force homeless people to move off the sidewalks and parks. And now this has made it very difficult for cities, particularly like San Francisco, to force their drug addicts into treatment or even into jail.
And if you offer them shelter, of course, then they do try to say you can't come in here if you are using drugs. So you have to go outside to use them, and that's why people stay outside of the shelters?
I think that's exactly right. And actually, one reason it's gotten worse actually since the pandemic is during the pandemic, the city actually paid to put homeless people up in hotels, but also paid to give them drugs. I'm not joking, and booze, so they wouldn't, so they could socially distance.
Dana, you go to San Francisco. Is there any are the politicians kind of figuring this out and doing anything about it, or is it just sort of throw up your hands and say, we're prisoners of the courts here?
Well, I think it's that, but I think it's also the fact that the mindset in the political class in a place like San Francisco and a lot of northern cities is such that they cannot grasp the reality of what they have done. Paul, this is liberalism and progressivism imploding. They took down the guardrails around personal responsibility. They did it psychologically, socially, culturally, but they've also done it legally. They decriminalized drug use, like marijuana. They decriminalized things like shoplifting. We have an epidemic of shoplifting on the West Coast now. And this is a tsunami that they cannot control at this point. They had to have possibly foreseen that it was going to create problems of this magnitude. And I have to be honest with you, there is no easy way to see how they're going to put all of these genies back in the bottle.
Kim, I guess the only thing that could put those genies back is political consequences for the city council in San Francisco, for example. Mayor London Breed could lose election. But also for the state representatives in Sacramento and Gavin Newsom. He won't campaign against this for some reason. He just goes along for the ride.
Yeah, let's start seeing some candidates in California who are actually running against these officials for their lack of competency, but we're also running with some ideas because there are ways that you can handle this. I mean, we need to get this appealed, this decision that Alicia was talking about, up in front of the Supreme Court, the cruel and unusual punishment in the Eighth Amendment that creates vagrancy. But we also need a political movement in California and politicians pushing to get rid of Prop 47, which is what has made it so difficult to get any treatment. Look, people who are on the street these days, they aren't largely there because they can't afford accommodation. They're there because they have mental illness, as Alicia said, or a drug use problem. And the only real way to kind of get these people into treatment often is a consequence of jail or the need to get them in a program if they want shelter. And they've lost all of that ability to do that because of Prop 47.
Alicia, briefly, is that case going to be appealed to the Supreme Court?
It has been appealed to the Supreme Court, and now the Supreme Court has to decide whether to take it. It was actually, there have been two cases, one going back to 2018, and I think there was concern that at one point that maybe Justice Kennedy would be a little wobbly, but I think, you may actually get a majority of justices to agree to hear it now.